Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming on such a day with this weather. We really appreciate that you came here for this event. Beginning with this, we have the Global Science Fiction Conference that features 3 events, actually. The first one is the keynote address today by Andrea Hairston. And after that, this evening, we have the screening of a Cloud Atlas that begins at 7 p.m. And we have an all-day symposium tomorrow, beginning at 9 a.m. Everything will be here at the Collins Cinema. Our keynote speaker is Professor Andrea Hairston. She is a distinguished science fiction and fantasy playwright and novelist. She's currently the Louise Wolf Kahn 1931 Professor of Theater and Afro-American Studies at Smith College. She's also the artistic director of Chrysalis Theater and has created original productions with music, dance, and masks for over 30 years. Standing with her today is the musician Pan Morrigan, who serves as the music director at the same theater, right? So yep. Andrea and Pan have collaborated, worked together on a lot of fantastic productions. Andrea Hairston won many awards. In her resume, I saw the list that goes 2 pages, 46 awards on her resume. Among them is the Carl Brandon Parallax Award for her first science fiction novel, Manscape, yeah, which was published in 2006.
Yes.
Right? And her second novel, Redwood and Wildfire, this one was published in 2011 and won the James Tiptree Jr. Award. Today, Professor Hairston will read from this novel, Redwood and Wildfire, with live music, performed by Pan Morrigan, who will sing songs she has written based on the lyrics from the novel. The melodies are influenced, I quote from actually the materials you give me.
Okay.
Are influenced by blues, Irish music, and something indefinable. I feel it's like science fiction, right?
Yeah.
And wild, syncretic. So after the reading, Andrea will be giving a short talk titled Conjuring the Future, Post-Colonial Divination. Welcome, Andrea and Pan.
Thank you. Wow. You're going to sing. Thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. Sorrow Mountain is actually a song I wrote for Redwood and Wildfire. And I'd like to thank, where is he? Professor Ming-Wei Song for conceiving of this. Oh, there you are right there. And the Newhouse Center for inviting me and having and hosting this wonderful conference on global science fiction. And I really thank you all for coming because it's dangerous out there. We passed 4 accidents on the way here and they didn't look pretty. So I will perform from my second novel, and also from my just finished February 22nd novel, We'll Do Magic for Small Change. And Pan has written all the music based on the lyrics in the book. One of the characters in Redwood and Wildfire is Aiden Wildfire, or Aiden Cooper, and he is a banjo player and a blues musician. So I told Pan she had to learn the banjo so that she could write his music. Because I only write songs when I'm him, and she decided she had to learn the banjo to sing those.
I only play them when I'm him.
Right. So Locust Magazine wrote this about Redwood and Wildfire. Murder, magic, and the transformative power of music are just a few of the things touched on in this vivid historical fantasy about two dreamers, Aiden, an Irish Seminole man, and Redwood, an African-American hoodoo queen, who leave their backwoods Georgia home for the bright lights of Chicago at the beginning of the 20th century. So I'm going to do a later chapter. It's 1910. And Saeed is a Persian acrobat and friend to Redwood in Chicago. They do vaudeville and film together. Chicago is a major early film town. Cowboy and Indian movies and African safaris are shot on the back lots, like the documentary Big Game Hunting in Africa. It was a documentary, this is actual, I'm a theater scholar, where there was an actor playing Teddy Roosevelt for the documentary, and African Americans played the savages. And Redwood's stage name is Sequoia.
Shackles you just don't see. Running won't set you free. Running won't make you free.
Saeed and Redwood, dressed as savage Africans with grass skirts, animal skins, and gator teeth necklaces, paced the back lot of Chicago's newest motion picture factory. Large bones, turkey most likely, from a nearby slaughterhouse were stuck through their hair. They squatted in front of a round hut with a thatched roof. Other natives, similarly dressed, huddled near them at the edge of a jungle. Fake palm trees that had been added to local crabapple, dogwood, and sassafras trees. Redwood blew a purple prairie smoke blossom that trailed silvery filaments as it went to seed. "What part of Africa is this?" Saeed asked. "Chicago, Abyssinia," Redwood laughed. Saeed laughed too, and who are we again? "Nobody." Redwood suddenly turned glum and clutched Saeed. "What is it?" A lion grumbled. "What are they doing to that old cat?" She looked toward the sound. "Ah, they tease him to look ferocious." Saeed squinted. "He doesn't want to come out of the cage." Huh. She hugged herself. "Well, I got an idea for a motion picture, a colored romance on a sea island." "No one will make that. White folk are scared of colored romance." Saeed shrugged. "I mean, who'd come to see it?" "Well, for a nickel, colored folk will. Don't they come to the club after hours to hear us, or head on over to the Pecan Theater to see All Colored Adventures in Dark, Phil? You know, white folk come too, everybody does." "Well, I hear rumors. The Pecan's going broke and about to close down. I mean, you can't get rich entertaining niggas. Don't be quoting Eddie to me." Histrionic yelling was followed by fevered drums. Saeed pulled her up. He put on his savage face. "Time to welcome the great white hunter." Throwing up her hands in exaggerated fright, Redwood ran with Saeed and a crowd of screaming savages toward a row of cameramen cranking away. "I don't work with divas anymore." Mr. Payne looked like the dead president for true this afternoon as he yelled at the idle cast and crew on the back lot of his motion picture factory. The light was better outside, but 3 days wasted? Payne resented every red cent spent to keep a village of screaming savages on hand for the rampage and the big hunt. Redwood sucked her teeth. She slouched against a flimsy African hut and scratched the itchy grass skirt going to seed around her waist. Payne is not yelling at you, Saeed was scratching too. The lion was still refusing to act. Redwood wanted to yell at the lazy creature herself. Well, they are happy, Saeed pointed at African savages rolling dice. Well, of course, the Pullman Porter extras weren't complaining. In between grueling trips through wild country with cheapskate passengers acting African put good money in their pockets. But Redwood and Saeed were headliners, real show folk itching to perform. Shooting a motion picture wasn't strutting across the stage to get lost in applause and laughter, in the audience sucking in one breath together. It was endless waiting for the sun to escape clouds, for crew to pamper finicky lenses or catch huts blown about by the wind machine. A turkey bone slid from Saeed's slippery hair. He shouldn't have tossed that kinky fright wig. Redwood sighed, with this beetle-headed scenario, who can blame that lion for pouting in his dressing room? Get that lazy cat moving! Payne coughed in his handkerchief and marched off. A cage door opened to the lion, snarling and spitting. Several white cameramen looked anxious as they cranked images of this beast, old and broken-toothed, but still a ferocious sight. A muscular handler with a pockmarked ruddy complexion and streaks of gray in his hair smacked the lion in the belly with a big stick and cracked a whip. The lion snarled and swiped, mane bristling with rage. The handler cracked the whip again and caught the lion in the face. The animal drew back as the handler jabbed harder at skinny ribs. Oh, that ain't a good idea, Redwood shouted at the handler, and then whispered to Saeed, that must hurt. Saeed groaned. Oh, too many people. This animal is frightened and very angry. With another whip crack from the sunburnt handler and more painful prodding, the lion retreated further into the cage instead of coming forward. The handler shouted, and the lion crouched up against the bars, looking weary and pathetic. Damn fool, you want to get us fired? The handler was cussing the lazy beast, talking about an old bag of bones, when the lion leapt. Redwood was stunned by the sudden power and grace of the rippling muscles, but something was wrong. With jaws gaping and claws slashing the air, the lion aimed itself at the foul-mouthed handler, whose whip now hung limp in his hand. The lion's golden eyes flashed murderous rage. The handler shook his head and turned his back as if he couldn't believe the lion would dare attack him. He moved in slow motion, while the lion was a streak of light. "Where are you going?" Saeed yelled as Redwood ran toward the lion. A sharp wind from an electric fan tore the mane from the lion's neck to reveal a she-cat in disguise. Cast, crew, and cameraman gasped. The lioness was momentarily distracted by her costume problem. She shook violently till she was free of someone else's ratty old mane. The handler had gotten back up to speed and was charging away. Too late. The lioness recovered her momentum and cut the distance between them in 2 easy bounds. She tore into his behind, ripping through the pants and sinking her teeth into soft flesh. The handler howled. Redwood slowed to a walk, praying for a good spell to come to her. Two cameramen froze over their lenses. One thin, pale man continued to film while the African savages and the white hunters screeched and knocked each other over, scurrying away. Redwood recognized the curly red beard and scraggly eyebrows, Nikolai Minsky. A determined fellow, he shook off his comrades, urging him to run, and continued to roll. They gripped their cameras and dashed away. The handler, with the lioness clamped to his butt, struggled toward Nikolai, begging for help. Nikolai's eyes darted up from his lens. Without a whip or a gun, what could he do? Running was the only safe option. Possessed, a demon driven to capture this deadly spectacle, Nikolai shifted his camera's vantage point and continued rolling. Redwood danced in front of the lioness. The wind got caught in her fierce moves. A train of fog snaked through the dust at her feet. Prairie smoke seeds, a cloud of silvery purple filaments spun round her head. As Redwood swirled like a hurricane brewing, the she-cat let go of butt flesh and raggedy pants and spit her mouth clear. She licked blood from her broken fangs. Stepping over the whimpering handler, the lioness crouched low and moved toward Redwood. A stiff wind chased clouds across the sky. Nikolai praised the returning sunlight as he cranked on his camera like a demon. Redwood sprang high in the air, cloaked in a cyclone of fog and prairie smoke. In the middle of a spin, she fixed her eye on the lioness. She felt a great thundering heart, wheezing lungs and aching joints. Front paws that had bounded through fire were tender. A bruised shoulder ached where the handler had poked too hard. Cheeks and eyes stung from the whiplash. Yet more than all this, Redwood tasted rage. Killing rage, swallowed down too long and coming up strong now. Breath become rage, flesh become rage, and fangs and claws the sharp edge of rage. Redwood landed at the lioness's nose. Prairie smoke seeds settled on her grass skirt and fog evaporated in a whistling hiss over her head. The lioness came to a halt also, fangs bared. For a good while, there was nothing but the two of them. Now, Redwood hadn't done any wild conjuring since 1903, when she and Aiden had gone off to the Chicago Fair. That trip seemed like a dream, a story she told on herself. Who could say if it was true or not? She had known killing rage since then, and it had made her a stranger to herself. She remembered that wild young gal, beloved by the spirit in everything, not afraid of bears, gators, hurricanes, or crazy men wandering the night. She just couldn't find her. The lioness snarled. A tall figure in a black hat watched from the shadow of an old oak. If Redwood had lost her hoodoo power too, if this conjure trick turned or called the Boneyard Baron to her and she died this day, well, at least Nikolai would get a record of her true spirit on film, and who would be able to deny that? The lioness circled Redwood, crouching till her belly brushed the ground. She drew her lips back over jagged fangs. The crowd roared and startled them both. Behind the lioness, a brave African savage dragged the blubbering handler toward a distant crowd of folks who looked ready to run, but eager to see the show come to any gruesome end. The lioness's chest rumbled. Oh! Oh, she's purring! Nikolai reeled in the images, his eyes ablaze, his thin frame shaking. Saeed stood next to him, waving and speaking beautiful words, yet their meaning escaped Redwood. Perhaps Saeed was so desperate, he spoke Farsi. Behind Saeed, one of the animal wranglers waved a rifle. Where'd he been all this time? That's a growl, fool, the wrangler said. The boneyard baron tipped his hat. She's all yours, Nikolai urged Redwood on. Saeed gaped at him. Move out the way, gal, the wrangler gunman yelled. Redwood ignored him and tangoed with the snarling or purring lioness toward the cage. The sun dipped low, setting wisps of clouds on fire. Pain was out another day's wages. No more filming today. Redwood had danced the lioness almost back to the cage. Their motions blurred into one another, and Redwood felt heartache for a time before this time, for fierce sisters, babies lounging in the heat, and a great bearded fellow rolling in the grass. Redwood peered with lonely lion eyes through bars at barren landscape of circus tents and train boxcars. She turned up her nose at rotten meat covered in maggots and flies as each second stretched long and unbearable. Fire singed her whiskers, and she gulped a breath of smoke, coughed, and growled. The lioness batted a sore paw at Redwood, bringing her back to the smelly cage. I can't, damn it! Sequoia's in the way! Someone shouted. Nobody dared get close enough for a clear shot. Redwood gently took hold of the swollen foot. The lioness laid her head against Redwood's hip. Redwood pressed her cheek against a furry ear, drawing the pus and pulling the pain from one paw, then the other. With a rumbling chest, the lioness danced beyond reach to deep inside the cage, where bars kept the leering and snarling people out. She sat on her haunches and licked her paws, eyes never leaving Redwood. A shot rang out. Stunned by the force of an impact, by skin and bone exploding, Redwood's arms flew open. She stumbled and closed her eyes on a punctured lung and fatal heartache. A second shot whined by in the darkness and slammed through downy fur into soft flesh. And then Redwood could hear no more. Time was undone, bleeding away. Redwood opened her eyes. The lioness was twisting in the air. The second bullet had hit her belly and ripped her open. Guts poured out with the blood. The white hunter and African savages stood behind a gunman, cheering and laughing. With fear standing in his eyes, Saeed ran into the cage. The dead weight of the big cat fell into Redwood. She hugged the animal to her. Claws dug at her ribs as they tumbled to the ground. Blood spurted onto Redwood, sticky, hot, smelling of copper and bile. The lioness's tongue flapped against Redwood's shoulder. Coarse as sandpaper, it scraped away skin. Puffs of bloody, fetid breath fogged the air. Golden eyes turned glassy and gray. Grimacing, Saeed rolled the lioness off of Redwood's heaving chest and talked at her, but she couldn't hear him or anything else. He looked concerned at her injured shoulder and the blood dripping down her side, and as he checked her wounds, she pushed him aside with such force, he tumbled several feet and hit the ground hard. The wind was knocked from his chest. Saeed scrambled in the dust to regain his senses and came for her again. Redwood jumped over the lioness and charged at the gunman, running faster than Saeed, running with gale-forced rage. As she bounded toward them, the white hunter and African savages grew silent, motionless, and then backed away. The gunman lost his grin as he noted their retreat. Panicked, he aimed his weapon at Redwood and shouted something, but she charged on. He fumbled and stumbled and then pulled the trigger at point-blank range. His rifle misfired, burning his fingers and dislocating his shoulder. Redwood smacked the gun from his hands and slammed into him. Terror and pain disfigured his face. She balled her storm hand into a fist. It took great effort not to punch him again. He fell down at her feet and clutched his chest like an actor miming a broken heart. She turned away from him, walked past a frightened white hunter and stunned African savages, past Saeed even, and back into the cage. Redwood sat with the lioness's head in her lap, staring through the bars. Saeed shrugged at everyone and sat next to her. Demon Nikolai cranked the last of his film. He nodded at Redwood, pleased, it would seem, with her bravura performance. Redwood took a choked breath. Sound returned. But she didn't want to listen to the voices babbling at her and wished for the silence again. It did not come.
But it will set you free. Oh, loose and I can free. But then you'll still be a slave. In shackles you just don't see. But it will set you free. But it will set you free.
So now I'm going to do a piece from my just recently finished newest novel, We'll Do Magic for Small Change. And literally, I sent it to my agent on February 22nd. So you're getting like hot off the computer, not off the typewriter. I was about to say out of the typewriter, but it's computers now. This novel is actually, it's hard to call it a sequel to Redwood and Wildfire, but it is in one sense, since the granddaughter of those two characters is the main character in this one. But this is science fiction and that's fantasy. Or that's how they've been labeled, I'll put it that way. We'll Do Magic takes place in the 1980s in Pittsburgh, PA, and also in Dahomey, Paris, New York, and Chicago. And this first excerpt that I'm going to read is from an alien, or a wanderer, as the alien names itself. And this is the alien's account of its arrival in Dahomey. So this alien first arrives in Dahomey in 1892. Are you tuned? Okay. Chronicles 1, Dahomey, West Africa, 1892, still point. Kehinde was fearless and a Hosi, king's wife, warrior woman, running for her life, daring to love and honor another man above Bahanzin, the king of Dahomey. She saw me come together in scummy water, tumbling over smooth boulders, my eyes drawn from rainbows, feet on fire, crystals melting into skin. Momentum carried her through the cave mouth toward me as bright green algae twisted into hair and I sucked in foam and slime to form lungs. Even if she had wanted to run from an alien creature materializing from mist, dust, and light, there was nowhere to go. Enemy soldiers rushed past our hiding place, bellowing bloodlust. Seeing me emerge into human form, Kehinde did not scream or slow her pace, but accepted this event, an impossible vision, a dream, nightmare unfolding before her as truth. Her disciplined calm eased my transition. Yet nothing prepares you for the first breath, for the peculiar array of new senses, or the weightiness of gravity. I was stunned by the magnetic field and the urgency of desire for food, for touch, for expression and connection. The first experiences are paradise. As I selfishly reveled in the miracles of this universe, in the delight of a new body, danger threatened at Kehinde's back, bayonets, bullets, and 100 furious feet. She gulped the humid air and glared back and forth between me and the watery entrance. Her deep brown flesh was torn and bleeding as her heart flooded bulging muscles with iron-rich, oxygen-dense blood. An unconscious man was balanced on the fulcrum of her shoulder. He bled from too many wounds onto the knives, guns, water gourds, ammunition, bedroll, food, wooden stool, palm leaf umbrella, human skulls, and medicine bags that hung from a belt at her waist. She settled the man against the damp earth. She kissed his eyes, stroked his hair, and murmured to him. Foreign projectiles lodged in his organs. He'd soon bleed himself away. Abandoning him would have improved her chances of survival. Yet she had no intention of doing this. Kehinde's spirit appealed to me at once. My body settled on a form close to hers. She aimed a rifle at me. Later, I would learn that she was a sharpshooter, Kapeto, an elephant huntress, a merciless killer of her enemies. In these first moments, I understood the murderous device, yet felt certain she would not set its lethal projectiles in motion. Too noisy. Why give herself away to harm me, a naked being just coming to my senses? She could not fathom the risk I pose. Trusting me for the moment was reasonable. I pushed her weapon aside with my still spongy cheek and bent to the suffering man. Kehinde shifted the rifle toward the cave opening and held a knife at my writhing algae hair while I ministered to him. If I knew then what I know now, I might have been able to save him. Perhaps it was better for me that I was so ignorant of human bodies. He might not have embraced a newly formed wanderer. Kehinde might not have become my guide. Lonely wanderers fade back into the space between things or fracture incessantly until they are next to nothing. Kehinde! The man groaned and reached for her. Samso! I covered his mouth quickly. Kehinde dripped fragrant, salty fluid onto my face, silently urging me to act, to aid the broken man. With minor core manipulations, I eased pain, calmed turmoil, and gave them a few moments to share. The man came swiftly to his senses and gripped her calf. She thrust the rifle into my hand. I grasped it clumsily and monitored the cave mouth. I doubted my resolve and my accuracy. My bones were still gooey, my muscles rock hard. She crouched down to the dying man. They passed soft sounds between them, inhaling each other's breath. She never betrayed his last words to me, yet I'm sure he exhorted her to leave, to let him die with the hope that at least she had a chance to live. She shook her head, resisting him. The people who carried her death in their minds raced again through the water outside of our cave. The man heard them and clutched a blade at her belt. Samso! Insistent, he ground his teeth and spit this word at her. A name, I later learned. The sound made my throat ache. Someone splashed close to the entrance. Kehinde's heart raced. The dying man nodded at her and closed his eyes. Kehinde sucked a ragged breath. Samso, she said. Her hand shook as she forced her cutlass through his heart. He did not cry out. My own heart rattled in my chest. Kehinde pressed her lips on his as blood burbled to an end. She wiped the blade on the damp ground and threw a wad of cloth toward me. Words rained down, a frothy hiss, barely audible, like steam bubbling through a hole. I understood nothing and waved the cloth at her stupidly. My new body was starving for language. I gorged on her sounds, gestures, smells. I lapped up the twists and turns of her nose and lips, swallowed the flashes of light and dark from her blinking eyes. Her expressions were tantalizing and rich, but sense would only come after more experiences. Abandoning me would have greatly improved her chances of survival. She had no intention of doing this either. I resolved to know her completely. Kehinde would be the still point of my wandering on this planet. I'm going to do another short piece from Will Do Magic for a Small Change. And it's 1987, and Cinnamon, the major character, is almost 15. And she gets caught up in story storms. Words take her over. And in this particular moment, she's telling an EMT person, or perhaps an alien, about her mother, Opal, who collapsed in a theater and has been taken to the hospital. Cinnamon wants to get to the hospital to run interference. woman's tongue ached with the words flooding her mouth. Words were her shield. Maybe it wasn't life and death for Opal like Sekou or Raven. Maybe Opal wasn't so sick that she couldn't get well. Still, my mom is a trial lawyer like Uncle Clarence, and she gets folks to trip up on their own lying selves. Her court is everyday life, like before Christmas. The bus company threatened to fire her over some cheating passengers, a glam couple, sort of Bonnie and Clyde. They were trying to ride downtown flashing week-old transfers. Clyde claimed Opal shrieked death threats at them. And my mom barely raised her voice, never does. I mean, a 2-pack-a-day smoker, no lung power to get loud with. They were screaming and scamming, but Opal Jones was in the wrong for not being nice. But the bus company couldn't fire her, though, because she was a hero, too. I'm not exaggerating. I was there. I saw her. After Bonnie and Clyde, this young guy jumps on my mom's bus with 10 inches of knife, yelling, "Close the damn door!" That knife was as long as his forearm, and that's 10 to 12 inches on most folks. But the bulky dude, he had like greasy orange hair, muscles like slabs of ham across his chest and back, and nice clothes, but kind of needing a wash. I mean, he's almost cute too, like Klaus. But anyhow, the crazy sucker waves the knife in folks' eyes, but doesn't say what he wants. Doesn't say anything except, "Close the damn door!" Grown men are cowering in the back of the bus, and I'm sitting in the middle, coming back from my beautiful laundrette, riding around with Opal till she's off work, supposedly doing homework. Laundrette's an R-rated movie from England, but nobody ever cards me in Shadyside. Well, at first, I don't even notice the crazy guy carrying on. I'm just kind of staring out dirty windows, replaying a scene from Laundrette. Johnny and Omar doing the nasty while the washing machine sloshed dirt and grime loose, like Sekou and Dr. Lexi. I mean, having a really good old time. Cinnamon didn't need to explain Sekou and Lexi for this story. Right, okay. So a freaked out commuter scrambling for cover elbows me in the jaw, or I'd have missed the whole knife scene. Opal's forever saying, "You all the time with your nose stuck in a book, daydreaming, lost in nothing. The world could end and you wouldn't even notice." It's true, too. Anyhow, my mom is up in this wannabe punk's face, not doing some angry black woman rant, just talking quiet, motherly, logical. I mean, she can kill you with logic. The guy has to step close to hear her raspy smoker's voice, bass alto. He lowers the knife as she lectures him for trashing the schedule, scaring little kids, grannies, and grown business suits. It's quiet on the bus. We all listen to her. "You got us sprawled across 2 lanes, holding up traffic for what? So you can ruin your young life? Think about it carefully. What are you doing here?" My mom shoves her last $10 in his pocket and fusses at him about all the beautiful time he'll have to waste paying for this stupid escapade. The girl he loves with all his heart down the tubes, along with the whole kids that they're going to have together and the whole Jimmy Stewart wonderful life. A bust! She is dead certain that they're good people who are really counting on this guy. And there's a mountain of opportunity that he's going to discover just 1 block over. She pats his cheek and says, "It's a crime to waste hope or give up belief." I write that shit down. She never talks to me like that. The guy's face breaks apart. His nose is a fire hydrant pouring snot. My mom can read anybody's mind easy. I mean, you got to watch thinking too loud around her. Opal ruffles his nasty hair and says, "Don't look at me like you're a big nothing. I believe in you too." The guy just drops that knife at her feet and jumps off the bus when she opens the door. "Have a nice day," she says to him, and then, "Everybody all right?" These words are like a hoodoo spell, swallowing up tension. People clap and hoot and take their seats. She hides 10 inches of knife somewhere without anybody noticing and drives on. Unbelievable. I mean, I wouldn't even believe it myself, except I was there. So when we get home, I ask her, I say, weren't you scared? How'd you do it? And she says, your grandfather taught me how to bring somebody back to their right mind. Aiden told me, don't spit in somebody's eye and pretend like you washing it out. Opal never talks nice about my grandparents or my great aunt. Old-timey, backward folks, so country they make her itch. That's how she usually is. I should have gotten her to tell me more about Granddaddy Aiden. But see, my grandparents and great aunt, they're coming, because they always do. You know, when there's like when it's trapped. Was this a lie she wanted to be true? Was she turning coincidence into magic? Aunt Iris promised. What if they didn't come? Cinnamon had kind of dissed them after all. Why had she stopped believing the elders were on her side? Well, anyhow, a girl on the bus snapped photos of Opal and that kid with hair in his face, knife in his fist, living color proof. I got it in my magic words journal. Even the bus company couldn't fire a hero. I mean, not with proof and witnesses. Over Bonnie and Clyde trying to do a getaway for free? I mean, please. Opal Jones stopped a guy from ruining his life and made up lost time without breaking the speed limit. Now, how would it look firing a hero? Mentioning Sekou and Lexi getting it on like in Laundrette was stupid, dangerous too. Maybe they could still prosecute Lexi for doing a minor, even after Sekou was dead. Uncle Clarence and Cousin Carol would love nothing better than some faggot put away, some demon to blame for running your mouth like a racehorse again. Opal would be so mad. Talking to you, might as well broadcast on the emergency network. So this last piece is from Redwood and Wildfire. This is from Aiden's journal. Aiden is Cinnamon's grandfather. This is 1890s Georgia. And Aiden keeps a journal. And Pan will be doing, of course, again, Aiden's music. Walk in the stars. Stories and songs are medicine too. Aiden's father, Big Thunder, was of the Wind Clan, one of the first clans to come out the mountains when the Master of Breath called the Indians from the navel of the earth into life. Wind Clan was whirlwind friend to Panther Clan, clearing away giant roots so that his big-headed brother could make it into sunlight. The other clans tumbled in after that: deer, bear, corn, bird, potato, and all the rest. Big Thunder had to marry across the fire. His first wife was Snake Clan. His second wife, Ashlyn, was an O'Casey from County Cork. They married far across the fire. Your parents are dead, Aunt Caitlin said to Aiden Wildfire, and you are Aiden Cooper now and nobody else. These mountain people you live with got taken by fever and coughing sickness. You are strong stock, lucky. You take after Ashlyn, and I love you as my own. Don't go running off, hiding in the swamp, acting like a wild savage. Aiden was young, and sadness was sharp nettles clinging to him, digging deep, drawing life blood. He missed his parents and the clan of mountain folk who had made the world home. Aiden cried in the night. He grew sick and pale, not from coughing or fever, but grief. Finally, when Aunt Caitlin couldn't get any food to stay in his belly, she took Aiden to Miss Garnet Phipps and pleaded with this colored conjure woman to hold her adopted son to life. Miss Garnet set George and Redwood to their daddy to help him in the fields. She had Aiden gather hairy roots for a healing brew. They watched it boil in a black iron pot. A dead smell filled the house. When darkness fell, Miss Garnet stood by Aiden on the porch. The moon didn't bother to come out. The air was a heavy blanket of heat. Aiden felt a chill in his heart all the same. Oh, shooting stars! Miss Garnet pointed at streaks of light. That's a sign for sure. What the stars got to say to us, Aiden said. Miss Garnet sang a star song in Gullah Creole, and Aiden could only feel the meaning, a traveling song, a song for loved ones far away. You know, I knew your daddy since I was younger than you. She put a warm cup of the nasty brew in Aiden's hands. His people and my people been around these parts for a long time. You know, I got family over to the Sea Islands still. My daddy knows folks from everywhere. Aiden was proud of who he come from for a moment. Aunt Caitlin said I shouldn't talk about him. Well, I'm a hoodoo, here and underneath things, and you can't hide the truth from me. Now, we can talk about your daddy and your mama, too, if you like. Just us. I won't tell nobody. Aiden put the cup to his lips and drank the medicine down quick. It was sweet and frothy. Felt good going down. His tongue tingled and his belly didn't feel so tight. Miss Garnet sat down in the rocking chair and opened her arms. Aiden crawled into her lap like he was a little child, and they rocked together slowly. He liked her hickory smoke, sweet magnolia scent. She wore an orchid in her hair. Seemed like it was growing there and not ever fixing to die. You know, your daddy told me a story once about the Milky Way. She pointed to the stars. The master of breath blew into the sky and made the white pathway, Aiden said. Oh, he told you too, ain't that something? Yes, the white starway leads to a city of light where good people go when they're dead. Gullah song tell a similar story. Your mama and daddy are there, smiling on you, hoping you have a long life, a good life, before you walk the stars to them. Well, Aunt Caitlin don't believe in the Milky Way. Uncle Charlie neither. It's up there in the sky for us all to see. A prayer every night. A good story fill you up when you're hungry, when you're lonely. A good song take the hurting out your spirit. No harm believing in that. She gave him a wind-up music box. Play this. And think of the stars smiling on you.
Are you guys still awake? You can get up and move around if you want. Warm up with me or something. No takers? Okay.
I'm up.
You got to sing along with me because she has to do this whole speech, so you have to help energize us after all the driving we did. So the song is like, it's not that hard. It goes, la, 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 la. Do that. La, 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 la. Okay? Hey, do that.
Hey, hey, hey.
Now put it together.
Hey, 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 I have the words. I'm cheating.
Nobody can burn. No, no. That's you guys.
Nobody can burn. No, no, no.
Put your
Hold it in your, hold it in your,
hold it in your heart.
hold it in your
heart.
hold it in your heart.
Here.
Hey, 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 nobody can.
Nobody can turn. No, no. Choose the red and choose the red and choose the red and hold your breath. To ash and smoke, pain and regret. Ash and smoke, pain and regret. How much you wanna bet?
Hey, 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 hey,
Your chance to holler. One verse, okay?
Nobody can set. Nobody can set.
The spirit on fire, the spirit on fire. Oh, except with love.
Oh, except with love.
Oh, except with love. Okay, come on.
Hey, 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 ah, hey, 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 except with love. Oh, except with love.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. If I have any voice left. So, conjuring the future, post-colonial divination. Just a few weeks ago, on a cold February morning, as the sun was rising over Siberia, a mountain of rock exploded into the sky brighter than the sun. Shock waves tore through windows, shook up cars, brought down walls. War? Bombs? The end of the world? A few Siberians followed the light trail of the exploding rock to a glassy hole in a frozen snowy lake. As they ventured close to this meteorite that had traveled across outer space, burned through the atmosphere, and landed in their tiny corner of the planet, they joked, wondered, hoped for little green aliens to emerge and say, "Здравствуйте, мир, как дела?" Hello, Earth people, how's it hanging? The Siberians, this is actual, I didn't make this up, you remember, right? The Siberians, along with the rest of us, live in a science fiction and fantasy world. In Russian, mir means world, peace, community. Science fiction and fantasy maps our contemporary mir. Of the top 10 grossing films worldwide in 2012, all but one, Skyfall, was SF&F. The 23rd installment of the Bond series could hardly be called staunch mimetic realism. In the non-linear echo chamber of narrative, SF&F is loud and oft-iterated and much enjoyed. These are the stories we tell to understand, to engage the troubling, exhilarating life and death question of the colonial and post-colonial age. How can we be different together? And the companion questions, what does it mean to be human? What of the monsters among us, or the non-humans, post-humans? Can we survive one another? If so, how? Time and space have shrunk. Borders are permeable. We can't escape one another. The final frontier is means working it out together. See Cloud Atlas tonight. Science fiction and fantasy storytellers are the prophets of our age, practicing post-colonial divination. They are hoodoo practitioners working their mojo. Hoodoo is a syncretic magical practice, not a religion like Vodou of Benin or Haiti, but close kin. Hoodoo is an African-derived, Native American and European immigrant-inflected performative healing spiritual practice. Should I repeat that? Hoodoo is an African-derived, Native American and European immigrant-inflected performative healing spiritual practice. Drawing on ancestral knowledge, local wisdom, and individual spirit, Hoodoo practitioners devise rituals to conjure the future and celebrate the here and now. With props, costumes, music, and chants, Hoodoo is inherently theatrical, engaging the body and the imagination in the healing process. Hoodoo conjuration is a performance to call down the necessary spirits, an improvisation to activate insight and force change. Drawing on West African cosmology, Hoodoo encompasses everything from herbal medicine used to cure physical and psychic ailments to the creation of fetish bags or mojo for attracting lovers, punishing enemies, and working tricks. Mojo are the props for making change. Hoodoo notions of mojo have entered the American vernacular with heavy sexual connotations related to the exaggerated penis power of black bluesmen. Although working mojo is a spiritual act erotically charged with the power of the creative, it is not exclusively or primarily sexual. Mojo can facilitate any powerful desire. No matter the oppressive circumstances, men or women who get their mojo working are always agents of change. The power of hoodoo is the power of a community living and ancestral that believes in its capacities to heal and determine the course of today and tomorrow. In hoodoo rituals, the ancestors come to the aid of the living, for we are the flesh of their spirits. Doing the rituals allows one to conjure a future, even in the face of apocalypse. In the early 20th century, hoodoo was condemned as backward superstition. African Americans coming north and negotiating a white Christian power structure renounced and condemned hoodoo. Many a black Christian minister preached against it. No matter that Christians believed in a Jesus walking on water, raising the dead, and coming back from the dead himself, hoodoo was something to bury, forget, as African Americans marched into a modern, rational tomorrow. But hoodoo persisted. To speak a thing is to call it forth. Every story is a spell. Science fiction and fantasy diviners, like hoodoo practitioners, illuminate the imminent possibilities of the here and now. They shake our minds loose from the iron grip of the indicative case. By substituting might be or would be for is, speculative prophets allow us the subjunctive flight of fancy that prefigures transformation and transports us to new worlds. Globalization and the multiverse are intimately entwined with science fiction and fantasy. The images of elves dissolving into mist, decimated forests fueling munitions factories, swarthy foreigners riding elephanten, and bold ships sailing from afar to conquer Middle Earth is a world war image, or a war of the worlds. There are always many other worlds in this world, but one ring to rule them all? Fantastic stories have always been with us. The mind is a portal, a time machine, a warp drive, a magic carpet whisking us to the far reaches of the universe and back again, changed. Fantasy resists a completely rational, knowable world, a world that can be utterly contained in our symbols, in our knowledge capacities, in our limited experiences. In fantastic stories, we play with reality. SF&F is imbued with the sacred liminal power of play. The sacred, following Gregory Bateson's usage, is at the nexus of the rational and the irrational, the linear and the nonlinear, the indicative and the subjunctive. Sacred is being and seeming, is truth and counterfactual, is metaphor, simile, parable, objective and subjective. The sacred is the bridge, threshold, edge of consciousness and unconsciousness. Artists are technicians of the sacred. We live in the stories they tell, and to riff on Joe Chaikin, we are connected to all living things by what we don't know, by the mystery at the heart of life, of the universe. According to scholars such as John Reeder and Farah Mendelssohn, European science fiction and fantasy begins to emerge during the Enlightenment and the age of colonialism. At the discovery of a plurality of Weltanschauungen, a plurality of other worlds, Europe is decentered, and so is Asia, Africa, the Americas, the Pacific Islands, etc. The Igbo of Nigeria say, it is the deity that people worship that kills them. So change, adapt. Science fiction and fantasy embodies and theorizes our changing global reality. However, the current speculative canon emerged in the monocultural imperatives of colonialism and global capitalism as local indigenous wisdom was replaced by distant techno-information. One ring to rule them all. For many, the apocalypse has already happened, and we're conjuring alternate worlds. People are often shocked to learn that I write science fiction and fantasy. Many consider playing with reality as childish. Read inferior, immature. Adults don't deal in the imaginary world. They are committed to the real. Grown-up minds and cultures are scientific. Male minds are scientific. White minds are scientific. The science fiction contradiction that Bateson would label sacred is suspect, and fantasy is an outright no-no. In the minds of some readers, writers, and critics, the mimetic realism of so-called literary fiction is the duty of the once colonized. It's in our best interest it's our best bet to reclaim lost or stolen history, recreate a positive group identity from shared experiences, and write ourselves into the future. The serious artistry of literary fiction is the best weapon to counter the science fiction and fantasy of European male supremacy. Another problem comes from within the genre. The future has been colonized. The colonized others, aliens, women, colored people, having missed the Enlightenment, can't really be at home in science fiction, can they? Magical realism, perhaps, but even fantasy supposedly occurs when storytellers and audience recognize fantasy's counterfactual nature. Exactly when this enlightened awakening occurred in Europe is debated. Did Euripides really believe in the deus ex machina that rushed in to save the day at the end of his plays? Did Shakespeare believe in ghosts and spirits? Today in the US, in addition to the folks doubting climate change or evolution, 55% of adults believe in personal angels. And 22% report having seen a ghost. 48% believe there are ghosts to be seen. Despite this, the colonized enter Western science as refugees from their magical worlds, prisoners of superstition, Hostages of the colonizer, slaves of the master narrative. Modernity and post-modernity, although products of colonialism, displace the colonized to the past, to history, to people who once were whole and have now been shattered by their backwardness, their poor competitive adaptation, their lack of science and democracy, their inept economics. We mourn the regrettable but inevitable demise of the native. The colonizers have consumed the colonized and define the future. So caught up in the past, still trying to survive apocalyptic history, how can the colonized imagine a future? How can a future be imagined that contains the remnants of their broken spirits? Broken? Really? That is not my history. The Russians say the future is assured. It's just the past that keeps changing. Yes. Story is the sacred technology that transforms time and space. Part of the project of SF&F is to recover history, to replace the ideological fantasies with alternate realities. The 10 top grossing films present a world centered on, dominated by white men from now until forever. However, Cherie Renee Thomas's Dark Matter anthologies collected a century of speculative fiction from the African diaspora. Cherie made the invisible, fantastical power of blackness available at the local bookstore and inspired readers and writers to enter the genre. Vandana Singh, who I think is giving a paper tomorrow, and Anil Menon have edited Breaking the Bow, speculative fiction inspired by the Ramayana, for Zubin Books in New Delhi. Vandana says, a few years ago, a couple of American editors I met seemed puzzled by my existence. I was Indian. I should write about saris, incense, and arranged marriages, right? What was I doing dabbling in science fiction? Most interestingly, an Indian author I talked to seemed surprised by my description of my writing SF from a third world perspective. Do you mean you write about reincarnation? Actually, Vandana writes stories exploring physics, biology, ecology, communication, and myth. Her experiential mathematicians dream their artistic solutions. Wrestling with climate change, near-future New Delhians reinvent their city, and steampunkers inhabit an alternate history filled with magic. Grace Dillon imagines indigenous futurisms. She edited a collection, Walking the Clouds, an anthology of indigenous science fiction. The authors she has gathered privilege SF over the great Aboriginal novel. Dillon proclaims in the introduction that SF provides an equally valid way to renew, recover, and extend indigenous voices and traditions. Walking the Clouds weds SF theory and indigenous scientific literacy with skin thinking. Skin thinking is embodied experiential, local wisdom, local science, hoodoo. I pour libation to these women and their marvelous endeavors, their post-colonial divinations. The struggle over the stories we tell is a critical one. As an SF&F prophet, I reclaim the past to conjure the future. Every story is a spell. Thank you. Yeah. What? Yes, questions? Yes. Questions, responses?
You take up you talked a little bit about the difference between science fiction and is there a useful difference between science fiction and fantasy for you? You identified some books that are called science fiction that you write? Some that are...
Yeah, I actually don't feel I fit neatly into science fiction and fantasy, but I recognize the need for definitions. And Grace Dillon, who does Indigenous Futures, talks about slipstream Indigenous writing, and I feel much more comfortable in that. The classic definition, I think, of science fiction is something that from what we know, could happen. In other words, we don't have faster than light travel, even though that's in science fiction, because faster than light, we can't accelerate faster than light as far as we know, given our physics. So even though lots of science fiction has faster than light travel, you have to figure out some theoretical thing like wormholes, which is what Carl Sagan does in Contact, to get around whatever is, we call it hand waving. The writers, we call it hand waving. Arthur C. Clarke said, a sufficiently distant civilization would have science that would seem to us like magic. And this is my problem. So anything that we project into the future is as magical as Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, the wizard doing whatever it's doing. So to me, I am less concerned with that definition.
No, I sort of guessed that you would be.
Yeah.
So I was interested in that.
Yeah, and also I found that in the genre wars, it's about marketing. It's also about masculine versus feminine, and the fantasy is viewed as soft and feminine. And wow, we have something. Ursula Le Guin calls it fear of dragons. We have fear of dragons. Right, I don't have fear of dragons. I'm like, dragons, great. I was a physics major, so I don't have fear of physics or of dragons. So to me, I agree with Gregory Bateson. I'm interested in the sacred, which would include relativity and dragons. Because there's a truth in those things. Depending on where I'm standing, I'm looking for truth, not fact. And I think literature is about the subjunctive case. It's not about, it's what might be. So it's subjunctive. So science fiction is a fantasy. It's just a certain kind of fantasy. And then there are the hard science fiction writers. You see, hard. And this, to me, takes up the continual masculine division of the genre, as opposed to the soft fantasy, which is somehow immature and not real. And we have metaphorical minds. And I like to speak to those minds. And I have no problem when I'm trying to understand physics. I love Einstein's metaphor. Like what he did, he imagined himself riding on an electron or on a photon and tried to see what the world would look like. That has to be a fantasy. Nobody could get their ass on a photon, right? So excuse me, what is Einstein doing but fantasizing and using fantasy to come up with his own view of the world? And a lot of his thought experiments are very much about his prodigious imagination. And so to me, that's if I can do that and embody that, then that's what I want to write. So Redwood and Wildfire gets classified as fantasy, even though my publisher said, well, but it's very science fictional. And Grace Dillon would also talk about native or indigenous science, which may or may not agree with some of Western science. So, and the jury's out, which is not the same thing as climate change, because another issue. So, yeah.
I really love both your readings and your talk. I have one question.
Yes.
You were saying about fantasy and I think about gentle science fiction that people still kind of see it as juvenile and mature.
They do.
And I'm just wondering, because I started teaching fantasy about 20 years ago.
Yes.
And at that time it was really hard.
Yes.
I have the impression it's gotten somewhat better, that people at least don't kind of snigger as much. And certainly my students seem...
My students 20 years ago were totally, and I'm in theater, so I'll step up here. In theater, absolutely no problem. In the English departments, it's very difficult to I don't know what department you're in. Okay, yeah, English departments, or in graduate school, if you wish to do your MFA, because I teach writing, and I want to send my undergraduates to graduate writing programs, and it's almost like no S&F need apply. So it's very hard to find. There are a handful of graduate writing programs. If you look at, I can't remember which of the big, it's not the NEA, but it's one of the big grants. They say, oh God, Guggenheim, don't send science fiction and fantasy. So there are ways in which it is viewed as bad by nature. Shakespeare was popular culture, but now popular culture has a negative term. Right, so I'm from the theater. We don't actually. When I stepped from the theater, and I was like, oh my God, no, we don't care. Is it a musical or is it a straight play? That's the big question. So it's a very different set of questions than, it's like, this is like a metaphorical world. We're on stage, so what are you talking about? All of, realism is like pretending the audience isn't there, and that's more real. So the theater has like a whole different set of codes. So I was actually shocked by the resistance, even still. I think it's the Guggenheim, that you can't send in science fiction. You could send in magical realism, though, which is very interesting. Yes?
So you mentioned that science fiction and fantasy is male-dominated in parts, and I'm thinking mostly of Lord of the Rings and how there doesn't seem to be any. It's just very male-dominated, and so I noticed that your protagonists mostly were female, and so I was just wondering what your take on sort of feminizing fantasy.
Well, just like you were saying 20 years ago, women have been writing science fiction. There's a wonderful book by Justine Labarlestier, in which she shows the history of women in science fiction from the sort of golden age in the 30s right up to the present. And so women have been writing science fiction all along, and not getting credit, not getting acknowledged, as one might see women in other areas. So it's been a very long struggle. My novel won the Tiptree Award, which is given in honor of James Tiptree, who was a woman. And so Alice Sheldon, thank you. So James Tiptree passed herself off as a James in order to get her work out there. And what is very interesting is that this is not the 19th century. This is not George Sand, or this is or I'm still in that century, in the 20th century. So it's still, even though things have changed, things have gotten better. There are many, many wonderful women writing, getting published, but women still get reviewed less, get fewer rewards. And if you think about things that get made into films, unless you are sucking after vampires, it's very hard. It's very hard. So, so it's been a very male, and people argue that the golden age, the 30s, where the pulp magazines were basically for these, sort of geeky males who were interested in science stories. And that's a major influence on science fiction. But those weren't the only people interested in science fiction. Those weren't the only examples. But it's a solid core, and that core has continued. So recently there was internet kerfluffle over whether women could write science fiction. Just, like a few months ago, it was huge, nasty. Those internet nasties get, you can ping it around the world so quickly, and it just rises up. So this is a constant, ongoing thing. It has not, in my mind, significantly changed. Ursula Le Guin, who's been writing since the 60s, 70s, is still talking about this, the issue. She regularly checks into how many reviews are there, how seriously is it taken, the writings by women. And there are many organizations and groups working to change that, to promote women. There's Broad Universe, there's the Tiptree Prize, there's WisCon, which is a science fiction and fantasy convention that happens every year at Memorial Day in Madison, that looks at gender and science fiction and fantasy. So there's a huge force of people working to change that. My publisher is Timmy Duchamp, who started a feminist press to publish science fiction and fantasy. And interestingly enough, her books are just like winning awards and doing wonderful things like that. So are you interested in writing science fiction and fantasy?
I do.
Yay! Go to WisCon! Yeah?
I really liked your comment that you're looking for truth, not fact. And I think that in a lot of academic disciplines, truth is equated with fact. And so I was just wondering for disciplines that are not traditionally associated with the arts, I kind of think that everything is an art. But how do you merge that fantastical, subjunctive into fields where it's not, that's looked at as a fiction?
See, I don't have any trouble with fiction. So what would you mean? What kind of?
Like,
Yeah.
things that can't be empirically proven, but I don't know, I think they're real.
Uh-huh.
How do I
argue or?
I don't know. I'm a philosophy major,
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
I'm coming from that department where, in some classes, not all,
Uh-huh.
depends, but like indigenous wisdom or like the unknown or anything that really can't be rational, anything beyond reason isn't considered.
Well, I think, if you think of epistemology, which would definitely go with philosophy, what is knowable? And, it really is beyond, we are a subset of the universe. So it's extreme hubris, from my perspective as a theater person, to assume that we are able to capture with our symbols the entirety of the universe. This is like seriously. And what I know is obviously limited. It has to be limited. Almost like I could argue that. I'm a mathematician, so I know I could argue that if I really sat down and worked it out. And also, when I think of physics, indeterminacy is like, I don't know, for the last 115 years, that's where physics has been going, more and more and more and more. So I don't see, I'm a theater person, so a lot I believe in the subjective. And as a physicist, I believe in the subjective. And that truth is subjective. It is not facts. And facts are actually pretty slippery. So how do we define them? And why are we defining them? That's my question. What's the context? So I want to know the context for whatever thing you are saying is true or factual. So to me, all of those things are always important. You have to historicize, contextualize, and set up your first order principles. Because everyone starts with those. So I don't see it as a problem. Like Euclidean geometry is only true ideally. And it's great to use it, right? Like we build things with it, but, try it on like when you have to go, oh my God, we can't do it on a sphere. What happens to Euclidean geometry? Just something like that in mathematics. And the notion of the fuzzy thing. Like, is an apple after you've taken a bite? These are great philosophical questions. After you've taken 2 bites, when does the apple stop being an apple? Is a piece of an apple an apple? Does scale matter? All those questions to me are like, and why do I care? Like, so first off, like I want to understand it, but I only care because you shouldn't have eaten my apple, right? and like you're charging me for this, so what's the context of my discussion of what it means to be an apple? So I think that's, there's a wonderful theater artist, Anna Devere Smith. Do any of you know Anna Devere Smith? Yeah. Okay. So any group of people will give you the facts of their experiences, and those will not be in alignment. And you can see her wonderful theatrical productions that are based on interviews that she does and presents to those people. And the facts don't line up, but the truth does, right? The truth of what everyone's saying, because you can have truth that is contradictory. But it's hard to have facts that are contradictory. And so for me, that's why I'm less interested in facts and more interested in the context of the truth statement. Like, why are you saying that? What is your intention? What is your motivation? And how can we really figure out what you need to say that? And the assumption, I think, of Western science is that it is objective, right? And I don't agree with that.
Right, I agree with you. So I guess what I'm getting at, like in some classes, like the subjective in court, I don't know how to explain this. Sometimes like the subjective or I don't know, literature, like experimenting with form or trying to express truths in a way that is through fantasy writing or through something that is not technically real is frowned upon. So I'm trying to say, how can that be brought into disciplines where it's...
I would send them to Gregory Bateson, who talks about, I grew up when Bateson, whatever. I grew up and I read great texts, and one of them was Gregory Bateson, and he talked about sacred unity. And one of his things is this issue that you're talking about. And he was a scientist and an anthropologist, but believed in faith, right? So if you have, I think, in Carl Sagan's wonderful film Contact, book and film, a wonderful science fiction piece, Sagan absolutely has faith that there is extraterrestrial life. He was ridiculed in the scientific community because he has no actual proof. And it's very hard to test whether or not. So he can't do the things that you're supposed to do in order to, present a statement and see if it's true. But he had absolute faith in that, and was, actually even denied a place for a while in scientific societies based on his search for extraterrestrial life. And I was very inspired by him, in addition to coming up with nuclear winter, which should have given him an amazing place, but since he was looking for extraterrestrial life, I was persuaded by his arguments. And more people are making similar arguments. Galileo, when he wrote some of the stuff, couldn't actually test it. It's only recently that we could test some of the things that Galileo said at the time, right? Because nobody could go out and look at it. So Galileo looked at the moon and said, I'm a painter, and the light and shadow is wrong for it to be a flat surface. So since I'm a painter, I'm going to argue that the moon is three-dimensional. That's a very good argument. I'm persuaded. And then I'm going to argue these other things, because I'm a musician, and I'm going to put these little balls and have them roll down. And I hear this stuff, and my God, this must mean this. So he did all this, thinking that went beyond what he could the balls he could generalize it to the whole universe, I guess. So I think the scientific mind depends on faith and intuition as much as anything else. So that's where I would go. Someone up in the back? Yeah? Oh, or yeah.
Well, I just was interested in your choice to set the novel in the 20th century.
Which, the new, Will... oh, right, it's at the turn of the 20th century.
Right, rather in history,
yeah.
from our vantage point.
Right.
And so I guess I'm sort of interested, maybe it's a little bit in relation to this question about, but I mean, what is your process in trying to revisit these historical moments? Do you have to do a certain amount of kind of research and fact checking, or do you then sort of say, well, this is my departure, I'm going to...
No, I am an academic, and so I spent years, actually, I teach a class on minstrelsy, an early film, and how it developed from that period to our performance traditions now. And I actually decided to teach the course because I wanted to research the book. So the best way for me is to teach a class, because if I have to teach the class, I do more research for teaching my class than I will for my book, and then I can because I'm devoted, I'm like, yes. Whereas when I'm writing a book, I get a little impatient. I want to just get to the writing. But if I'm teaching a class, I can't do that. I have to do a broad sweep, know all these different things, read all this different stuff. So, and I was teaching another class on black theater, and I had done a little teeny-weeny section on minstrelsy. And I went, that's lame. What are you doing? You've said these same things for 15 years. Do you believe them anymore? So I was prompted to go and do research on it. And to understand it. And I taught the class, and my students were really good. It's great, because you get all these wonderful papers, and then you do more research. So, and while doing that, I saw that I really was going to write this book. So it was after teaching the class for several years, 3 years, I think, then the book came really quickly. It was easy, because I was very fluent in the world. So I could sit down and write it.
And it sort of allows you to have sort of a sense of, well, here's what we know historically about this period, and then here's what I could imagine.
Because there's a lot we don't know, and that's one of the things that I'm very interested in, conjuring what I don't know. So particularly, women are ignored. So Bert Williams is a famous minstrel performer from the turn of the 20th century. Ada Overton Walker, who was one of his partners, is hardly known at all. And when I tried to find out what she thought or what she was doing or any of that stuff, it was very frustrating. I read all the little bits I could. I read the newspaper accounts of her stuff. I read reviews of her. But you can find books on Bert, and you find footnotes sort of on her. There are Native American filmmakers from the time. Women were making films more then than they are now. It was sort of like YouTube, right? I have a camera, I'll make a film. It didn't cost very much, so there was a huge outpouring of film, and then it narrowed down. So I was just very interested in all those people and what they were doing. And Chicago which is a big theater town, was also at the early beginnings of film, or in Chicago, before they head to California and sunny days all the time. So all of that fascinated me, and I wanted to talk about, well, big game hunting in Africa is a lost film. But once I read that somebody made it and they used Pullman Porters for the, I was like, oh my God, okay. And they had an actor playing, and it was labeled documentary. And I realized, okay, this is really interesting. So I was very fascinated. And then there was a power couple, Native American power couple, and they acted in like cowboy and Indian movies, got enough money, and then made their own movies. And some of those are at the Smithsonian, so you can see them. And then African Americans were making their own movies. There were a few comedies. And then we've lost all these movies that women made. They're lost. And so there was a point when I was really pissed. And then I went, you're a science fiction and fantasy writer. You can make it up. So it just like, that's part of like recovery, is this is lost. I can get inside these people. I will try to imagine what it's like. And so since I'd done all the research, I just said, okay, you do theater. You know what it's like. So yeah, I tried to put all of that into it. Yeah.
Several questions. This was a great talk. One of the questions that I was interested in is, you talked a lot about, you said, you know, a lot of the top grossing films, and you kind of talk a lot about films.
Yeah.
And one thing that is interesting, I'm teaching just a sort of basic level world literature class this semester. I'm doing Ramayana, we did the Iliad. And when I was talking to my students, and I don't know quite yet if I can articulate it really well, is it so, when I read those things when I was younger, in a more like, you would say, a more strict kind of class, you know,
Yeah.
like, this and that, you know,
Yeah.
and it's flattened out. But I found when I was reading them now, after watching like The Lord of the Rings about 20,000 million times as my child, you know, and also it's the visual of, yeah, there's a dragon, it's the visual, yeah, you go down the mountain and there's this thing
Yeah.
there, and there's a visual of this and a visual, and then it's become so real, and the visual effects have become so real.
Right.
So it's almost like the power of film has moved back into the power of literature, because
Yes.
it's given a visual
Right.
reality to
To-
those things. Because that, like when Rama does all this stuff
Yes.
with his
Right.
you know, bow and his arrows and his Rama,
The
the ten-headed god. who's
theater-
great. It's like, it's very funny. It's like, now I can actually imagine. That seems so real.
Well, and it was already going on with theater. Most of the special effects that you see in film are pioneered in theater. So Méliès, who's a very early filmmaker, was a theater artist, and he did magic on stage.
Whitney brought some movies. We just
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, right. So, and he like colored. He did all, but yeah, but the stuff that he did before he did was a theater artist, and he did a lot of stage magic. And so what he actually shoots is first he's shooting stage magic, and then he figures out film magic, having been a magician on stage. It's just amazing. So the early, his work in particular, which has great influence. And then you have other, like Maschinenmensch guy, Metropolis. The German filmmakers come out of the theater and come out of the expressionists and the surrealists, who on stage were, you know, like, oh my God, incredible things that they figured out how to do on stage. And so the audience, for instance, Frankenstein was done as a play more than it was read as a novel. Like, it gets published, not too many people read it. Then there are like 30,000, I mean, there are all of these productions of it where they do all of the stage magic stuff, like things blow up, people fly in, things drop out, people disappear, and people would sit in the audience and go, oh! And we don't notice that as much anymore on the stage because film can do that, right? But it starts in the theater. So, and partly people love to be in an audience when magic happens and it ripples through the whole space. And so I think that our visual imagination is captured so well now by special effects, because they didn't make a Lord of the Rings because they couldn't figure out for a long time how are they going to do those special effects. And now we have them. Now we can do Gollum. And it's really amazing how the idea that it's an alternate reality is much easier now that we have the sort of technique of presenting the alternate as if it were real. And that really, like I said, is like 19th century theater right into film. That was part of the anti-realists would put on plays in which they would make alternate realities that looked real, and people were confronted with this whole idea of, oh, right, like the world is askew. So all that stuff in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, when it's all askew, and you see the world from someone's point of view, again, that came from German expressionist theater, and then gets put on stage, where the whole, if you look at paintings from the time, the paintings are doing that, as well as the film. And now we just can do it. I mean, it's, so I think that has a...
It really starts at like the 18th century, called the light show.
The light shows, right. So you can, yeah, and it just keeps developing. And right, all of that, yeah. Yeah.
So I really liked your reference to the Lord of the Rings, the ones who rule them all.
Yeah.
And I do want to hear more about how you view this phenomenon of like global science fiction and fantasy, and how that kind of brings with it another sort of colonizing gesture.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the monoculture issue. And I think it's interesting because I think Tolkien is arguing against that. So the replacement of local, and we're all local, so with like the 10 top films. So rather than the Ramayana inspiring stories that then become global hits that then we all watch, it's one group of global predatory capitalists who infect the entire world with their mythology and their superheroes and their view of the world, so that then when the little green men come in Siberia, as opposed to trying to figure out how my local response would be, I might be seeing it through the monoculture of film. I mean, one of the films that I've written a paper on is District 9, which has aliens that come to South Africa. And in that film, which is a satire, this one group that's satirized are the so-called Nigerians. And I say so-called because they don't really speak a Nigerian language. And since we know absolutely nothing about, we, the world, not individuals, but we, the world, know very little about Nigerian religion, the difference between Nigerian religion and South African religion, the fact that anyone in South Africa who's African but not from South Africa is called Nigerian, so therefore, so that's their term for foreign African, okay? And that the ritual performances that look just like voodoo that we've seen for, I don't know, too long, have nothing to do with either the Isangoma, which is the South African religious tradition that might have been going on right there, or with what the Nigerians do, Orisha worship, but is more like Hollywood voodoo than anything, right? There's no way that the satire can work as satire, because satire requires that you know what voodoo, what Isangoma, and what Orisha worship is for you to understand that it's being satirized, whereas it's just presented as this is superstitious weirdo Africans and their religions, which are pretty much the same all across the continent. They look the same in South Africa as they look in and this caused a huge, the Nigerians and South Africans went at each other about this film, which again we might not know because it's not as important, but it made $100 million in America and traveled all over the world. And so, and the women, there are hardly any women in it, but the one African woman is doing, she's like the priestess witch who does the thing. And Nigerian women are very amazing, powerful people who have women's societies that resist male domination. And again, we don't know that. So the whole way they're used is like sort of not how the women are historically. But none of that matters because we're not looking at it as satire. It becomes how we see the world. And this, to me, is like colonizing the future. And we want to get away from voodoo. So Haitians or other groups that practice these religions are prosecuted or persecuted, both. So that we, because it's viewed as some kind of thing where you want to chop off something and eat somebody and have somebody dead and have zombies and all of these things that are really from Hollywood movies. Not having very little to do with actual Haitian practices, but it has an effect on policies in Haiti and how the Nigerians are viewed worldwide, because, or the people from Benin, the Fon, the Dahomey, people. So all of those things are then, it's like colonizing the future. So you must get rid of that really strange religion. Like my Christian religion, where I go off and kill all these people and make them how I am, is still good, whereas you're chopping off these things and doing this strange voodoo thing. So we have to get rid of yours because yours is the dangerous religion. And that, to me, is part of the monoculture thing. And so you don't have a direct relationship with your own past. It's mediated through this monoculture. And then that means it's hard to have a direct relationship with your future, since it's mediated that way. So there are many writers and artists working to speak differently about those things. So, okay, yeah. Yes. That's a huge question, because the range of writing is, it's enormous on both sides, right? So I think it's the quality of the thinking behind the writing that is really important. So again, I'll use Ursula Le Guin, Earthsea trilogy, right? When it went from the books to the TV show, they, quote, whitewashed it because she had a whole range of colors that she had consciously chosen. And I know her, and she would choose everything she wrote. But when they made it a TV show, they made the major figures white. And in her book, they weren't. So, and she had to, like, fight with them, and then it didn't, it's, you give away your rights. So it ended up that there were hardly any colored, dark-skinned people in the leads in her story, in which she had written with all of them there. And I point to her, because if you've read Left Hand of Darkness or any of her books, she's dealing with all of this all the time. And so I think, and she's a great writer, and I love her work. So that's her early work. Her recent work also deals with these things. So it's not simply whether someone is white or Western, but the quality of their thinking. And the quality of her thinking is amazing. Oh, yeah. To get published, or? Yeah. Yeah, it's the system I was talking about with the same problem with women. When I was trying to get my books published, it's not that the books are poorly written or uninteresting, but the protagonists are weird. For Redwood and Wildfire, it's a Seminole Irish guy and an African-American woman who, want to be like theater film artists, make, I have a barn, let's make a show kind of story. But they were viewed as weird. Literally, I got like a rejection letter, like, the only reason I read to the end of this book was because of the quality of your writing. Remember that one? That's literally a quote that I share with my students to say, don't give up when you get this. Like, don't go running, screaming from the room. So, and these are strange characters. And there was nothing that I could see other than, and so it was very hard to get my books published because I don't center on the people you're supposed to center on. And so if you want to, also, science fiction and fantasies is like satire in that it requires a grounding. So you need to have an understanding of what reality we're playing with. So part of the issue is to get the context that might not be familiar. If you're setting a story in the Ramayana as the sort of using that as the kind of basis, then we're not fluent in those traditions, tropes, images, dilemmas. So you have to figure out how you're going to work that. That's one of your challenges. So if I'm using hoodoo, which I do, and we have like what I call the strange view of hoodoo, since my my grandparents did hoodoo, and then I heard what hoodoo was supposed to be, and I was like, okay, not the same here. How do I wrestle it from the images that I don't mean and recast it as the kind of image I do mean? So those are all, and those are difficult writing questions that actually everyone has, but we don't always know that because some people just rely on the master narrative and don't really tell a story. So that, they let the master narrative tell the story for them. They just sort of pull the like stock characters, give them the stock trials and tribulations, and then the audience will fill in the blanks. And that actually is a mediocre story, but those get published, right? But if you want to tell another kind of story in which you're not doing that, you have to figure out a way to train your audience up and tell your story. But those are great challenges for writers, I think. It makes you not lazy or complacent.
Just add one more thing,
Yeah.
after hearing what you said. We are just so used to the assumption that science fiction is defined by the English or American science fiction because the genre was invented here in this country. But
British people would argue with that, but
British people would argue with
but
that,
it's still
French people would argue with
right,
that.
exactly.
I just want to point out that
Yeah.
for example, in China today, people also believe science fiction was foreign from America. But actually, the
Yeah.
very word science fiction, the equivalent Chinese equivalent of the same word, the same genre, was invented in China in 1902. Well, in Japan, it's Meiji 19, right? That's
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
19th century, there was already
Right.
this term. And it's just in kind of a multicultural framework.
And I think one of the issues is that it's like colonizing is like we did everything, right? That's and everybody else really was not doing it, and when in fact that's not the case. And I think that's part of for me, like some writers are working to share that and to expose the real, I don't know, sort of, I keep coming back to hubris, but
Well, science fiction people, whether the writers, critics, readers, are more or less idealists.
Yeah.
We all believe in some sort of change, and no matter what this kind of change, maybe there will be no change at all. But still, this is a kind of.
Well, my grandparents would not be standing up here talking to you. There's been change, so they imagined this. They imagined me here. That's science fiction and fantasy. Because when they were doing it, it was not at all. I mean, they were born in the 1890s. Their world did not include a granddaughter who was going to be the Louise Wolf-Kahn Professor of Theater and Afro-American Studies at Smith College. But they said, I remember when I was little, you were going to do something great. And I was like, really? What or you're going to do all the things I did, all the stuff you don't want to hear from your grandparents. But, and we worked hard for it. And we, and I didn't really, part of the reason I also wrote this book is because I didn't listen to them when I was younger. I mean, I did. They're in my head. I mean, I am here because of them. But I didn't ask them, how was it for you in 1910 coming from the South to Pittsburgh? I could have asked that question, but, really, do I want to know that? I'm like, now I'm like, oh, I wish I talked to them. Then I could have found, so that I realized that they did have this amazing, apocalypse had happened, and they imagined that they would change things enough that I could be doing what I'm doing now. So, and that to me is what spurs science fiction and fantasy, that it's that we can make a different future than the one we're living in, than this particular present. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you want to buy my book, I'll be out in the hallway selling it and signing it. Buy the book. Yes.